Hi friends, I'm Emily and this is Ink Not Blood. Welcome to Book Buzz, a series where each video focuses on and discusses one book in particular. So basically a book review? Yes, basically a book review. This video will mostly cover broad topics, so consider yourself safe from spoilers. The book I'm going to be talking about today is Reeducation by Justina Ireland, released in April of 2018. Reeducation is told from the perspective of a teenage girl named Jane McKean, and it takes place in a reimagined version of the Reconstruction era of the United States. I am by no means a history buff, so you're gonna have to forgive me if I totally botch the details of this actual time in history. In our world, the Reconstruction era started after the Civil War, lasting from about 1863 to 1877, basically from the end of slavery and the Confederacy to when the last US troops were pulled out of the South. In Jane's world, things go a little bit differently. People killed on the battlefields of the Civil War start going from dead to undead. Yes, that's right. Civil War era zombies, or as they're called in the book, shamblers. Our protagonist Jane is being trained at an all-girls combat school where she and her classmates hone their shambler killing skills and become experts with weapons such as scythes, swords, and rifles. Jane's weapons of choice are a pair of sickles. Yes, yes. Okay, so what a premise. Zombies in a historical setting and a bunch of badass girls training to slaughter them? Yes, times a million, that sounds amazing. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this book, although it wasn't what I expected. First of all, I'd been hoping for more fight scenes. I figured if the protagonist was studying at a combat school, there would be loads of training, sparring, and battle scenes, and there were a few, just not as many and none as long as I'd been hoping for. You guys, I just really love fight scenes. Second, I wasn't completely sold on the plot. There were some points that seemed contrived to me, and I didn't particularly care for the ending. It felt more like a setup for the rest of the books rather than giving this book a satisfying conclusion. That being said, there were a ton of things I really loved about this book. Jane, the protagonist, is such a fun character to follow. She's super smart, curious, confident, and cunning, but she's also extremely impulsive. In one of my favorite quotes of hers, she says, "Here's the thing about me. I regret most of my actions 5 minutes after the fact. I'm rash in my decisions and I spend half my time trying to extricate myself from situations of my own making." Yeah, that's her in a nutshell. And how does she get out of those situations? She lies. She lies to stay out of trouble, she lies to protect herself and the people she cares about, she lies to keep people from worrying about her. You name it, she's lied about it. And I kind of love that about her. Jane's talent for lying actually ties right in with one of the themes I saw come up throughout the book: deception as a means of survival. Several characters secure their own safety at many points in the book by misleading other people. The most interesting part of this is how it ties into ideas about racial prejudice. On several occasions, characters of color downplay their own intelligence and capabilities in order to seem less threatening and fly under the radar, which ultimately helps them to survive. And while we're on the topic of racism and survival, let's talk about what exactly it is that the characters are trying to survive in this book. I know what you're thinking. It's a zombie book, so it's about trying to survive the zombie apocalypse. Well, yes and no. Lots of zombie narratives not only examine how people behave in the face of a new and constant threat, but they also examine how dangerous people become to each other in that context, which is something that I think this book does so well, and in an interesting way that I honestly haven't seen before. Jane says it well in the book when she states, "It's a cruel, cruel world, and the people are the worst part." There are zombies in her world, remember? So that's really saying something. Let's go back to the premise of the book for a second. The author, Justina Ireland, was inspired by the real-life existence of special boarding schools in the 19th century where Native American children were sent so that they could learn to be civilized. Ireland includes an author's note at the end of the book explaining that these schools broke up families, erased native culture, victimized vulnerable children, and hired out students for back-breaking labor, in a way that was essentially a loophole to keep some kind of slavery alive even though it had technically been abolished. Contemplating the existence of these schools, Ireland speculates, if well-meaning Americans could do such a thing to an already wholly subjugated community in a time of peace, what would they do in a time of desperation? and thus Dread Nation was born. In the world of the book, the US government has passed the Negro and Native Reeducation Act, which partly involves children of Black and Native backgrounds being sent to combat schools to learn how to fight against shamblers. While this sounds badass, the concept is actually horrifying. These children are ripped from their homes, essentially kidnapped, and then trained not so that they can protect themselves or their families, but so they can protect white people. Yeah, go ahead and rewind if you need to hear that one again. False justifications have been fabricated to support these actions, including the blatant lie that people of color are just naturally more immune to shambler bites. But the truth is that it's just a way for people in power to manipulate the system in order to better ensure their own safety and well-being through the exploitation and sacrifice of others. And not just others, but people of color. But sure, slavery is abolished or whatever. Dread Nation deals a lot with the topics of race and power, so if those are topics that interest you, I highly recommend this book. Dread Nation even touches on how different shades of blackness can change how a person experiences prejudice, including what it's like to be passing, which means having skin so light that you can pass as white. So back to where I originally started with this topic, which was the idea of survival. Consistently throughout the book, it's not shamblers that are the biggest threat to Jane and her life, it's people, hands down. In fact, Jane recounts several instances from her past in which she was almost killed, and not a single one of those recollections involves a shambler trying to eat her. Instead, Jane's story of survival revolves around how she has to live and maneuver in order to survive the threat that other people pose. Specifically, the people who see the color of her skin as a reason for her to be treated not only as less than human, but as completely expendable. It's a really interesting lens that this book uses to examine dynamics related to race, prejudice, and power. I am really eager to hear other people's thoughts on this book, especially people of color whose voices and opinions on this matter should obviously hold a more prominent place than my own. So as more booktubers discuss this book and share their perspectives, I'll be sure to link their videos down below in the description. Speaking of which, where are all the booktube reviews for this book? If you haven't read this book yet and it's just sitting there on your TBR, what the hell are you doing? Get on that! Before I wrap this up, I want to mention the not so subtle political commentary going on in this book. There's a political group in the world of Dread Nation called the Survivalists, and they basically believe that in the face of the zombie apocalypse, the continued existence of humanity depends on securing the safety of white Christians. There are even references to the whole zombie thing just being God's way of punishing people for daring to think that everyone should be equal and slavery should be abolished. Oh my god, it's so f***ed up. The Survivalist Party is super fixated on pre-war America, and its members talk a lot about restoring the natural order of things and how the idea of equality has ruined the country and how they yearn to return America to its former glory. Once more for the people in the back, they want to return America to its former glory. That almost sounds familiar. So overall, I gave this book 4 stars, and I will definitely be looking to continue the series whenever the next book comes out, which probably won't be for a while since Dread Nation was only released on April 3rd of this year. Curse the waiting! What's keeping this from being a 5-star rating for me is that I didn't really feel the plot drove any profound change in the characters. I think there could have been way more character growth by the end, instead of just a moving of the goalposts. Let me know down in the comments if this is a book you're planning on reading. Or if you've already read it, please let me know your thoughts. I am dying to engage with someone on this. Alright, that's it! Thank you for watching and for subscribing to Ink Not Blood. It is yet again time for me to give an awkward goodbye. 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 Yes! Nope. And hired out students for brack baking. Brack baking. I am tired of saying this.